The slap echoed through the cabin like something breaking. At 30,000 feet, inside a jet worth more than most neighborhoods, a white flight attendant stood over a black woman in a faded gray hoodie and said, "You don't belong here." No one moved. Not the man in the tailored suit. Not the woman with diamonds at her ears. Not even the pilot behind the cracked cockpit door. And then, her hand struck. The woman in the hoodie didn't scream, didn't argue. She just touched her cheek, slow, steady, like she was marking the moment instead of reacting to it. Then she sat back down in a seat she had refused to give up. Calm. Too calm. Because while everyone else looked away, pretending it wasn't their problem, her hand slipped quietly into her pocket and pressed one small button. No one noticed. Not the attendant who thought she had just won. Not the passengers who chose silence. But by the time that plane touched the ground the next morning, a single message had already been sent, and a contract worth hundreds of millions was already gone. See, that slap didn't just land on her face, it landed on the wrong person. The jet cut through the Georgia sky like a blade, silent, smooth, and impossibly expensive. Inside, everything was soft. Cream leather seats, warm golden light spilling from recessed panels. The quiet hum of the engines wrapped the cabin in a kind of insulated calm that money could buy and nothing else could touch. But in the aisle, that calm was already cracking. Lindsay Brooks stood there with her shoulders squared, one hand braced against the overhead bin as if she owned the space between every seat. Her uniform was pressed to perfection. Navy fabric without a single crease out of place. Gold wings pinned sharp against her chest. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Ma'am," she said. Her tone clipped, controlled. "I'm going to ask you one more time to move." The woman in the hoodie didn't move. Naomi Carter sat in the forward seat. The seat. The one that faced the cabin. The one with the folded cashmere blanket draped just right. The one every detail of this aircraft seemed to orbit around. She had settled into it quietly minutes earlier, placing her worn leather bag at her feet, her posture relaxed but upright, as if she had every right to be exactly where she was. Which, to Lindsay, was the problem. Naomi's hoodie was gray, slightly faded at the cuffs. Her jeans were simple. Her sneakers had seen better days. Nothing about her said wealth. Nothing about her matched the picture Lindsay had built in her mind of who belonged here. And once Lindsay decided something didn't belong, she didn't let it go. "I told you," Lindsay continued, her lips tightening. "That seat is reserved." Naomi looked up slowly, her expression calm, almost too calm. I heard you. Then you understand you need to move." A few seats back, a man in a tailored suit glanced up from his phone, his eyes flicking between the two women before dropping back down. Across the aisle, a woman with diamond studs shifted slightly in her seat, adjusting her purse, avoiding eye contact. No one said anything. Naomi rested her hands lightly on the armrests. "I'm fine right here." The words were simple, soft, but they landed wrong. Lindsay let out a short breath through her nose, a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "No, you're not," she said. "You're in the wrong place." The cabin felt smaller now, tighter. Naomi's gaze didn't waver. "I don't think I am." For a second, just a second, something flickered across Lindsay's face. Not doubt, not uncertainty, something sharper. Irritation edged with something deeper. She stepped closer. Up close, Naomi could see the details. The foundation set too thick along the lines of Lindsay's mouth. The faint scent of coffee on her breath. The way her jaw tightened just before she spoke again. You people always do this, Lindsay said, her voice lower now, meant to carry without sounding loud. Walk into places you don't belong and act like no one's going to notice. The words hung there. No one reacted. Not the man in the suit, not the woman with the diamonds, not the pilot, whose cockpit door sat cracked just enough for a shadow to be visible behind it. Naomi didn't respond. She just watched. That seemed to make it worse. Lindsay straightened, folding her arms. I'm not asking anymore. Either you move to the rear cabin, or I'll have you removed when we land. Naomi's fingers shifted slightly on the armrest. A small movement, controlled. I'm not moving. There it was, the line. For a moment, nothing happened. The engines hummed. Lights slid across the polished wood paneling. Somewhere ice clinked softly in a glass. Then Lindsay's hand moved. It wasn't fast in the way people expect. It wasn't wild or out of control. It was deliberate, measured, a motion that had already decided itself before it began. Her palm struck Naomi's cheek with a sharp, flat sound that snapped through the cabin like something breaking. Everything stopped. The man in the suit froze, his phone halfway to his ear. The woman across the aisle went still, her fingers tightening around her purse. Even the hum of the jet seemed to fade for a split second, swallowed by the silence that followed. Naomi's head turned slightly with the impact. She didn't cry out, didn't flinch away. Her hand rose slowly, pressing against her cheek, where the heat was already spreading beneath the skin. Her pulse throbbed there, steady, insistent. She could feel the shape of the moment forming, imprinting itself deeper than the sting. But her breathing stayed even, in, out. She lowered her hand, lifted her eyes, and looked directly at Lindsay. Not with anger, not with fear, with something else entirely. Certainty. Lindsay's chest rose and fell quickly, her hand still half raised, as if she hadn't fully come back from the motion yet. For a second, just a second, something uncertain crept into her expression, but it was gone almost as quickly as it came. She smoothed her uniform, adjusting the line of her sleeve like she had just corrected a minor inconvenience. Now, she said, her voice tight but steady, I suggest you take that seat in the back and avoid making this worse for yourself. Naomi didn't move. The silence stretched. No one spoke. No one stood. No one stepped in. Naomi's lips parted slightly, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet enough that it didn't carry far, but it didn't need to. You shouldn't have done that. Lindsay let out a short, dismissive breath. What are you going to do about it? Naomi held her gaze, just long enough. Then she leaned back into the seat, her posture settling as if the moment had already passed for her. Even if it hadn't for anyone else, her hand rested loosely in her lap. Her face, aside from the faint rising color on her cheek, gave nothing away. The jet continued forward, slicing through the sky like nothing inside it had changed. But something had, because whatever had just happened in that aisle, it wasn't over. Not even close. And somewhere beneath the calm surface Naomi wore so effortlessly, something had already begun to move. Something quiet. Something final. Something that would not stop once it started. The question wasn't whether that slap mattered. It was how much it was going to cost. 6 hours earlier, the world had felt quieter. South Phoenix woke up slow, the kind of slow that settled into cracked sidewalks and chain-link fences, where the air still held onto the night just a little longer before the sun burned it away. Streetlights buzzed faintly overhead, flickering as dawn stretched thin across the sky. Inside a narrow, sun-faded duplex at the end of a quiet block, Naomi Carter stood at her kitchen counter, staring into a mug of coffee she hadn't touched. The coffee had already gone cold. She didn't seem to notice. The kitchen was small but clean. Every surface had a purpose. A chipped ceramic bowl near the sink held keys, receipts, and a pair of reading glasses. A calendar hung crooked on the wall, dates marked in careful handwriting. There were no decorations that didn't matter. Naomi leaned one hand against the counter, her shoulders slightly rounded. Not weak, just tired. The kind of tired that didn't come from a single bad night, but from years of carrying too much without ever saying it out loud. From the living room, a soft cough echoed. Naomi turned immediately. "I'm up," she called gently, her voice warm in a way that didn't match the heaviness in her eyes. She walked down the short hallway, bare feet silent against the worn wood floor. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and laundry detergent. In the small bedroom at the end, an older man sat propped up against two pillows, a blanket pulled over his legs. His skin was thin, his movements slow, but his eyes were sharp. "You should have woken me," he said, though there was no real complaint in his voice. Naomi smiled softly. "And let you fuss at me before coffee? I'm not that brave this early." He let out a dry chuckle that turned into another cough. Naomi stepped closer, already reaching for the medical kit on the nightstand. She moved with practiced ease, unwrapping the bandage on his lower leg, checking the skin beneath with careful fingers. "You kept it elevated?" she asked. "Mostly." "That means no." I said mostly. Naomi shook her head, but there was no frustration in it. Just patience. Endless, quiet patience. "You want it to heal, you've got to do better than mostly." She cleaned the wound, rewrapped it with steady hands, adjusting the tension just right. Not too tight, not too loose. The kind of care that came from doing something over and over until it became second nature. "You've got somewhere to be today?" he asked after a moment, watching her. Naomi paused briefly, smoothing the edge of the bandage. "Yeah," she said. "Just a flight." "Work?" She hesitated. "Something like that." He studied her face like he always did when she answered that way. Like he was trying to read the parts she didn't say. "You don't have to keep carrying everything on your own," he said quietly. Naomi met his eyes, and for a second, something flickered there. Not sadness exactly. Something deeper. "I know," she said. But she didn't elaborate. She never did. Back in the kitchen, her phone buzzed against the counter. The sound cut through the silence, sharp and precise. Naomi picked it up without rushing. "Morning," she said, her voice calm. "Morning, Ms. Carter," a man's voice replied on the other end. Smooth, professional, alert in a way that suggested he'd already been up for hours. "Just confirming logistics. Everything is in place." Naomi leaned back lightly against the counter, her eyes drifting towards the window where the first real light of morning was starting to settle over the neighborhood. "And the board?" she asked. "They're ready," he said, "waiting on your signal." Naomi's thumb brushed absently against the edge of her phone. "Make sure everything is ready before the board signs," she said. "No delays." "Understood." There was a brief pause on the line. "Car will be there in 20, he added. "Same schedule." "Thank you, Marcus." She ended the call and set the phone back down. For a moment, she just stood there. Still. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space. A car passed slowly outside, tires rolling over uneven pavement. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once, then went quiet again. Naomi reached for her coffee, took a small sip, and made a slight face at the bitterness. It had gone colder than she realized. She poured it into the sink without hesitation. No second thought. On the counter, her phone screen lit up again. An email preview blinked at the top. Subject: Final approval. Naomi's eyes flicked to it. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she picked up her bag, a simple leather satchel worn at the edges, and checked its contents with a quick, efficient glance. Laptop, charger, a folder tucked neatly along the side. Everything exactly where it needed to be. Only then did she tap the email open. Her gaze moved across the screen, steady and focused. No rush, no anxiety, just confirmation. When she finished reading, she locked the phone and slipped it into her pocket. No reaction, no visible shift. But something had settled. In the doorway, the older man watched her from the hall. "You sure you don't want me to walk you out?" he asked. Naomi shook her head gently. "You rest." He leaned against the frame, arms crossed loosely. "You always say that. And you always try anyway." A small smile passed between them, the kind that didn't need explanation. Naomi stepped outside into the early morning air. It was cooler than it would be in an hour, the heat not fully risen yet. The sky stretched wide and pale above the rooftops, the sun just beginning to claim it. She locked the door behind her and paused on the front step. Across the street, Mrs. Alvarez was already out watering her small patch of garden, the hose spraying a soft arc over the plants. "Morning, Naomi," she called. "Morning," Naomi replied, lifting a hand in greeting. "You heading out early again?" "Yeah." "You work too much," Mrs. Alvarez said, shaking her head with a smile. Naomi smiled back, but didn't argue. At the curb, a black sedan turned the corner and rolled to a stop in front of the house. Clean, quiet, out of place in a neighborhood where most cars carried dents and dust. The driver stepped out quickly, opening the rear door. "Miss Carter?" he said respectfully. Naomi nodded once and slid into the seat. As the door closed behind her, the outside world softened into silence again. The car pulled away from the curb, tires gliding over the uneven street. Naomi leaned her head back slightly, eyes half closed, not asleep, just still. From the outside, she looked like anyone. A tired woman in a hoodie leaving a modest home at sunrise. Nothing about her suggested power. Nothing about her suggested control. Nothing about her suggested that in just a few hours, everything inside a luxury jet at 30,000 feet would begin to unravel because of her. And that was exactly why no one would see it coming. Scottsdale's private terminal didn't look like an airport. There were no crowds, no long security lines, no overhead announcements echoing through cheap speakers, just glass walls, polished stone floors, and the quiet hum of wealth moving efficiently behind the scenes. Outside, the desert morning stretched wide and bright, the sun already climbing, casting sharp shadows across the tarmac. Heat shimmered faintly above the concrete, even this early. The jet waited at the far end, sleek, white, and still. A machine built for people who didn't wait on anyone. Inside, Lindsay Brooks moved through the cabin like she was inspecting a stage before a performance. She adjusted a pillow by half an inch, turned a bottle so the label faced forward, smoothed the edge of a folded blanket that no one had touched. Everything had to be exact. It always was. She stepped back, hands resting lightly on her hips, scanning the space. Cream leather, dark wood trim, soft lighting, everything in place, everything controlled. That's how she liked it. After 22 years in private aviation, Lindsay didn't just do her job, she defined it. She knew what clients expected before they asked. She knew how to read a room in seconds. And most of all, she knew what belonged and what didn't. Behind her, Emily stood near the galley, holding a tray she'd already wiped down twice. She was quiet, yet careful, watching Lindsay without making it obvious. Emily had only been on this rotation for 3 weeks. 3 weeks was enough. Enough to understand that Lindsay operated on a line no one talked about, but everyone could feel. Warm on one side, cold on the other. And once you were on the wrong side of that line, there was no crossing back. "Did you check the manifest?" Lindsay asked without turning. "Yes, ma'am," Emily replied quickly. "One passenger, Naomi Carter." Lindsay nodded once. "Special requests?" "None listed." Lindsay let out a soft breath through her nose. "Of course not." Emily hesitated, then added, "Ground crew said the car's already on its way." "Good." Lindsay reached for a glass, inspecting it against the light. No smudges, no fingerprints. She placed it back exactly where it belonged. Outside, a ground technician approached the base of the jet stairs, clipboard in hand. A young black man, maybe mid-20s, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who knew his role and stayed within it. He climbed the steps, stopping just short of the doorway. "Morning," he said, holding out the paperwork. Lindsay took the clipboard without looking at him. Didn't say thank you. Didn't say anything at all. She flipped through the pages, scanning quickly, then handed it back with a small flick of her wrist. Dismissive, practiced. The technician paused for half a second, like he might say something. Then he didn't. He turned and walked back down the stairs. Emily watched him go. Then she looked back at Lindsay, who had already moved on, adjusting the angle of a seat as if nothing had happened. A moment later, the cockpit door opened, and Captain Harris stepped out, tall, graying at the temples, his uniform crisp but worn in a way that suggested years of routine. "Morning, Lindsay." Lindsay's entire posture shifted. Her smile appeared instantly, bright and effortless. "Captain, good morning," she said warmly. "Coffee's ready, just the way you like it." She handed him a cup with both hands, her tone softer now, almost welcoming. Captain Harris nodded, taking the cup. "Appreciate it." He didn't notice the difference. Or maybe he did. But like everyone else, he didn't comment. He disappeared back into the cockpit. Lindsay turned, her smile fading as quickly as it had come. "Stay sharp," she said to Emily. "We don't get second chances on flights like this." Emily nodded. She didn't ask what that meant. At 7:40, a black sedan rolled onto the tarmac. It moved smoothly, quietly, stopping at the base of the jet stairs with precise control. The engine idled for a moment before shutting off. The driver stepped out, opening the rear door. Naomi Carter emerged slowly. The sunlight hit her first, soft at the edges, sharp across her face. She blinked once, adjusting, her expression unreadable. She looked exactly like she had that morning. Gray hoodie, simple jeans, worn sneakers, one leather bag slung over her shoulder. Nothing about her had changed, and everything about that was about to matter. She walked toward the jet at an unhurried pace, each step steady, measured, not slow, not rushed, just certain. At the top of the stairs, Lindsay was already waiting, not to the side, not welcoming, standing directly in the doorway, blocking it. "Can I help you?" Lindsay asked. Not good morning, not welcome aboard, just that. Naomi reached the final step and stopped. "I'm Naomi Carter," she said calmly. "I'm booked on this flight." Lindsay didn't move. Her eyes traveled from Naomi's shoes, to her jeans, to the hoodie, then back up to her face. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. "Do you have identification?" Lindsay asked. Naomi blinked once, almost like she hadn't expected the question. "This is a private charter," she said. "My name is on the manifest. I still need to verify." Naomi studied her for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and opened an email. She turned the screen slightly, enough for Lindsay to see the confirmation. Name, date, tail number, everything in order. Lindsay glanced at it, then looked back at Naomi. "This could be anyone's phone," she said. The words landed heavier than they should have. Behind Lindsay, Emily shifted slightly, her fingers tightening around the edge of the galley counter. Naomi didn't react. "It's my booking," she said simply. Lindsay held her gaze. 1 second, 2, 3. Then finally, she stepped aside. But not all the way. Naomi had to turn slightly to pass. Their shoulders brushed. Lindsay pulled back immediately, like she'd touched something she didn't want on her uniform. Naomi walked into the cabin, didn't comment, didn't look back. She moved down the aisle, her eyes taking in the space with quiet awareness. The leather seats, the soft lighting, the stillness. She set her bag down near the forward seat. The seat. And sat. Behind her, Lindsay watched. Her jaw tightened. Something wasn't sitting right. Not the way Naomi walked. Not the way she spoke. Not the way she didn't react. It didn't fit. And when things didn't fit, Lindsay fixed them. She stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said, her tone returning to that controlled edge. Naomi looked up. "That seat is reserved." Naomi's hands rested calmly in her lap. "Reserved for who?" "For the client." Naomi held her gaze. "I am the client." Lindsay's lips pressed into a thin line. "I was told there might be a representative today," she said. "Sometimes owners send someone in their place." There it was. The explanation that made it all make sense to her. Naomi didn't argue. "I'm not a representative," she said. Lindsay didn't respond right away. She turned slightly, glancing toward Emily, then back at Naomi. "The rear cabin is more appropriate," she said finally. "You'll be more comfortable there." Naomi leaned back into the seat. "I'm comfortable here." Silence settled again. Heavy this time, because now it wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a choice. And Lindsay didn't like the direction it was going. Around them, the cabin stayed quiet. No one spoke. No one stepped in. The line had been drawn, and Naomi had just refused to move. For a moment, nothing shifted. The cabin held its breath in that quiet, controlled way people do when they sense something uncomfortable unfolding but don't want to be part of it. The kind of silence that wasn't empty. It was full of watching eyes pretending not to watch. Lindsay stood in the aisle, her weight slightly forward, like she hadn't decided yet whether to step closer or pull back. Her fingers tapped once against her forearm. A small, restless movement that broke the stillness more than any words could have. Naomi didn't move. She leaned back in the seat as if it had always belonged to her. Her posture relaxed but grounded. Not defiant, not submissive, just settled. That unsettled Lindsay more than anything else. "I don't think you understand how this works," Lindsay said, her voice tightening just enough to show strain beneath the control. Naomi met her gaze. "Then explain it." The simplicity of the response landed harder than any argument. Behind them, Emily shifted again, barely audible, the soft scrape of her shoe against the galley floor. She kept her eyes lowered, but her attention was fixed on the exchange. Lindsay inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "This aircraft," she said, choosing each word carefully, "is not a commercial flight. There are standards, expectations, protocols." Naomi nodded once. "I'm aware." "Then you should also be aware that certain areas are reserved for primary clients." Naomi's expression didn't change. "I am the primary client." The words hung there, flat, unembellished, and somehow that made them harder to dismiss. Lindsay's jaw tightened. "With respect," she said, though there was none in her tone, "you don't appear on the manifest the way our clients usually do." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "And how is that?" Lindsay didn't answer right away, because saying it plainly would sound wrong, even to her. But the meaning was already there, visible, heavy. "You understand what I'm saying," Lindsay said finally. Naomi held her gaze for a long second. Then she said, "I understand what you think you're saying." That was different. It shifted something. Across the aisle, the man in the suit adjusted his cufflinks, eyes fixed deliberately on his wrist. The woman with the diamond studs stared out the window now, though nothing outside had changed. No one wanted to be the one who reacted first. No one wanted to be involved. Lindsay let out a quiet breath, her patience thinning. "This doesn't need to turn into a situation," she said. "We can resolve it quickly. You move to the rear cabin, we continue the flight, and no one is inconvenienced." Naomi's hands rested loosely in her lap. "I'm not inconvenienced," she said. Lindsay's lips pressed together. "You're creating unnecessary tension." Naomi's voice stayed even. "No, I'm sitting." That was it. No raised voice, no sharp edge, just a statement of fact. And somehow that made it worse, because Lindsay was used to resistance she could push against. Arguments she could win, emotions she could escalate. This was something else. A refusal without confrontation. A boundary without aggression. And it gave her nothing to grab onto. The engines shifted pitch slightly as the jet leveled out at cruising altitude. A soft chime sounded from the cockpit, barely noticeable but enough to mark the passage of time. The flight had begun, and the problem hadn't gone away. Lindsay straightened, smoothing the front of her uniform again, a habitual motion that usually brought her back into control. Not this time. She glanced toward the cockpit, then back at Naomi. Then, without another word, she turned and walked toward the galley. Her heels clicked against the floor, sharp, deliberate, louder than they needed to be. Emily stepped aside as Lindsay passed, her body stiff, her eyes flicking up for just a second before dropping again. "Stay in your section," Lindsay said quietly as she moved past her. "I'll handle this." Emily nodded. "Yes, ma'am." But her hands didn't stop fidgeting. In the main cabin, Naomi reached down and pulled her bag closer, setting it upright beside her seat. She unzipped it slowly, the sound soft but distinct in the quiet space. Inside, everything was organized. Laptop, folder, charger. Nothing out of place. She took out the laptop and set it on the tray in front of her, opening it with a smooth, practiced motion. The screen lit up, casting a faint glow across her face. For a moment, she didn't type. She just looked at the screen, thinking. Then her fingers began to move, measured, precise, unhurried, like someone who had already decided how this would end. In the galley, Lindsay stood with her back to the cabin, gripping the edge of the counter. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark glass of a cabinet door. Everything looked the same. Perfect uniform, perfect posture, perfect control. except it didn't feel that way anymore. "She's not right," Lindsay muttered under her breath. Emily glanced toward her. "Ma'am?" Lindsay turned sharply. "You saw her, didn't you?" Emily hesitated. "She said her name is on the manifest." "That's not the point." Lindsay stepped closer, lowering her voice. "People like that don't book aircraft like this," she said. "Not without a reason. And I'm not about to let something slide on my watch because someone thinks they can play dress-up." Emily's throat tightened. "She doesn't seem—" "Don't!" Lindsay cut her off. Emily stopped. Lindsay's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're new," she said. "So let me make this simple. When something doesn't feel right, you don't ignore it. You handle it." Emily nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." But her eyes drifted, just for a second, back toward the cabin, toward Naomi, toward the woman who hadn't raised her voice, hadn't argued, hadn't moved, and somehow felt more certain than anyone else in that space. Back in her seat, Naomi paused her typing. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Then she reached into her hoodie pocket. Her phone slid into her hand. The screen lit briefly. She didn't look at it directly, just tapped it once. A small, almost invisible motion. Then she slipped it back into her pocket. No one saw. No one heard. And whatever had just been set in motion remained hidden beneath the surface. For now. Naomi returned to her work. The cabin remained quiet. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one carried weight. Expectation. Because something had shifted. Not loudly, not visibly, but enough that, even without understanding why, everyone in that jet could feel it. And the worst part? It was only just beginning. The cabin settled into a false kind of normal, the kind that only exists when people decide, collectively, to pretend nothing is wrong. The jet cruised steadily, engines humming low and constant, the sound so smooth it almost disappeared into the background. Sunlight streamed through the oval windows in long golden lines, sliding across the leather seats, catching the edges of polished wood and brushed metal. From a distance, everything looked perfect. Inside, it wasn't. Naomi sat in the forward seat, her laptop open, her posture unchanged. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with calm precision, pausing only when she needed to think, then continuing without hesitation. The faint mark on her cheek from earlier hadn't fully formed yet, but the skin beneath it was already warm. She didn't touch it. She didn't acknowledge it. Across the aisle, the man in the tailored suit shifted again, this time angling his body slightly away from her, as if distance alone could keep him out of whatever this situation might become. The woman with the diamond studs scrolled through her phone, her thumb moving faster than necessary, her eyes flicking up every few seconds before dropping again. No one spoke. In the galley, Lindsay sat with one leg crossed over the other, a glossy magazine open in her lap. Her posture was relaxed, almost casual, like nothing had happened at all. But her eyes weren't on the page. They were on the cabin, watching, measuring, waiting. She turned a page slowly, deliberately, the sound crisp in the quiet space. Emily stood nearby, hands clasped in front of her, trying to keep her breathing steady. She had repositioned a tray 3 times without realizing it, her movements small and repetitive. She kept glancing toward Naomi, then toward Lindsay, then back again, caught in between. At exactly 11 minutes past takeoff, Naomi reached up and pressed the call button. The chime was soft, clear, a single note that lingered just long enough to be heard. Above her seat, a small amber light flickered on. Naomi lowered her hand and waited. In the galley, Lindsay's eyes shifted to the light. She saw it. Of course she saw it. but she didn't move. Instead, she adjusted the edge of the magazine on her lap, smoothing it flat, as if it required her full attention. Emily noticed immediately. Her eyes flicked from the light to Lindsay, then back again. "Ma'am," she said quietly. "The call." "I see it," Lindsay replied without looking up. Emily hesitated. "She's been waiting. I said I see it." The words weren't loud, but they landed with weight. Emily fell silent. Seconds passed, then a minute, then another. The amber lights stayed on. Naomi remained still in her seat, hands resting lightly on the armrests now, her gaze directed out the window. From where she sat, the sky stretched endlessly, bright, cloud-dotted, indifferent. She didn't press the button again, didn't shift, didn't show impatience. She simply waited. In the galley, Lindsay flipped another page, slow, unhurried, as if time belonged to her. Emily swallowed, her fingers tightening against each other. At the 2-minute mark, she took a small step forward. "Should I?" "No," Emily stopped. Lindsay finally looked up, her eyes sharp. "I'll decide when service is appropriate," she said. "Not you." Emily nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." But her chest tightened, because this wasn't about timing, and they both knew it. Back in the cabin, 3 minutes passed, then 4. The lights stayed on. The silence deepened. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It was heavy, intentional. Everyone could feel it. No one spoke. At 5 minutes, Naomi shifted slightly, adjusting her posture, then rested her hands in her lap again. Still calm, still waiting. At 6 minutes, the man in the suit cleared his throat softly, then immediately looked down, as if regretting the sound. At 7 minutes, Emily couldn't take it anymore. She stepped forward, quietly, carefully, each step measured, like she was crossing a line she couldn't see but knew was there. Lindsay didn't stop her, didn't say anything, but her gaze followed her the entire way. Emily approached Naomi's seat, her voice low, respectful. "I'm sorry about the wait, ma'am," she said. "Can I get you something?" Naomi turned her head slowly. Their eyes met. Emily expected frustration, maybe irritation, maybe even anger. She found none of it. "Cha." "Coffee," Naomi said. "Black, please." Her voice was steady, unshaken. "Of course," Emily replied quickly. She turned and hurried back to the galley, her movements slightly rushed now, her hands not quite as steady as before. Behind her, Lindsay closed the magazine with a sharp snap. The sound cut through the space like a line being drawn. "What are you doing?" Lindsay asked, her voice low but edged. Emily froze mid-motion, her hand hovering near the coffee pot. "She's been waiting 7 minutes," Emily said quietly. "I'm aware." Then, "I decide when passengers are served," Lindsay said, stepping closer. "Not you." Emily's throat tightened. She just asked for coffee. "I know what she asked for." Lindsay leaned in slightly, her voice dropping just enough to carry. "That woman doesn't belong here," she said. "And until I figure out what she's doing on this aircraft, she doesn't get treated like she does." Emily stared at her. For a second, just a second, she looked like she might say something. Then she didn't. Her shoulders dropped slightly. She poured the coffee. The liquid streamed into the cup, dark and steady, the sound louder than it should have been. She placed it on a saucer, added nothing else, and turned back toward the cabin. When she reached Naomi, she set the cup down carefully. Here you go, ma'am, she said. I'm sorry again. Naomi looked at her. Really looked at her this time. At the tension in her shoulders. The apology that went beyond the words. Thank you, Naomi said softly. Emily nodded once, then stepped away quickly, returning to the galley without looking back. Naomi lifted the cup. The coffee was warm, but not fresh. She took a small sip anyway. Didn't comment. Didn't react. She set the cup back down and reached for her laptop again. But before her fingers touched the keys, she paused. Just for a moment. Then, slowly, she slipped her hand into the pocket of her hoodie. Her phone rested there, warm against her palm. She didn't pull it out. Didn't look at it. Her thumb moved once across the screen. A single, subtle motion. Invisible to anyone watching. The recording had already begun. And now, everything was being captured. Naomi withdrew her hand and placed it back on the table, her fingers settling beside the keyboard. Her face remained calm, unbothered, as if nothing had changed. But something had. Because now, every word, every pause, every decision inside that cabin carried weight beyond the moment. And no one else knew it. Not Lindsay, not Emily, not the silent passengers pretending not to see, which meant they were all still acting like they had nothing to lose. The cabin didn't get louder. It didn't get chaotic. If anything, it grew quieter. But it was a different kind of quiet now. Not peaceful, not neutral. This silence had tension in it, thin and stretched, like a wire pulled too tight. Naomi continued working. Her laptop screen reflected faintly in the window beside her, numbers and lines of text scrolling slowly as she reviewed documents with steady focus. From the outside, it looked like routine work. But her awareness hadn't slipped for a second. She knew exactly where Lindsay was, exactly who was watching, exactly who wasn't. Across the aisle, the man in the suit shifted again, his knee bouncing faintly before he stilled it with a hand. He glanced up, then quickly looked away when Naomi's gaze brushed in his direction. He didn't want to be involved. No one did. Near the back, the woman with the diamond studs leaned toward another passenger, whispering something too low to hear. They both glanced forward briefly toward Naomi before returning to their quiet conversation. The judgment wasn't loud, but it was there, layered into every glance, every hesitation. In the galley, Lindsay stood now, no longer pretending to read. The magazine lay forgotten on the counter, pages slightly bent where she had snapped it shut. Her eyes were fixed on Naomi, studying, reevaluating, trying to make sense of something that refused to fit into the box she had already built. She's too calm, Lindsay muttered under her breath. Emily heard it. She didn't respond, because she was thinking the same thing. Most people, after being ignored like that, after being spoken to the way Naomi had been, would show something. Frustration, anger, embarrassment, something human. Naomi had shown none of it, and that was what made it feel wrong. She's pretending, Lindsay added, louder now. That's what this is, Emily hesitated. Or maybe she's just, don't, Lindsay cut in sharply. Emily stopped again. Lindsay stepped forward, her heels clicking once, twice as she moved toward the cabin. This ends now, she said under her breath. Emily's chest tightened, because she knew that tone, and it never led anywhere good. Back in her seat, Naomi paused her typing again. Not because she had to, but because she could feel it. The shift, the movement coming before it happened. She didn't turn, didn't look, but her body registered it all the same. The faint echo of footsteps, the tightening of air, the way conversations in the cabin softened just slightly, like people were preparing to listen without appearing to. Lindsay stopped beside her. Close. Close enough that Naomi could feel the presence without needing to look. For a moment, Lindsay said nothing. She just stood there. Then she let out a small, sharp breath. "You know," she said, loud enough for the nearest rows to hear, "it's interesting." Naomi didn't respond. Lindsay tilted her head slightly, watching her. "I've been doing this a long time," she continued, "and you learn to recognize patterns." Naomi's fingers rested lightly on the keyboard. Still, listening. "People come in here sometimes," Lindsay said, "thinking they can play a role. Dress it up. Act like they belong." A pause. "And usually," she added, her voice tightening just enough, "it doesn't take long before they slip." Across the cabin, a few heads turned, subtle, careful, pretending it was coincidence. Naomi closed her laptop slowly. The click of it shutting echoed more than it should have. She placed her hands on top of it, folding them together. Then she looked up, finally, directly at Lindsay. "And what pattern do you think you see?" Naomi asked. Her voice was calm, not defensive, not confrontational, just curious. That unsettled Lindsay more than if she had argued. "You don't ask questions like that," Lindsay said. "Not if you actually belong here." Naomi held her gaze. "Maybe I'm asking because I'm interested in your answer." A flicker of something crossed Lindsay's face. Irritation, sharper now. "People who belong don't have to prove it," she said. Naomi nodded slightly. "That's true." For a second, it almost sounded like agreement. Then Naomi added, "But sometimes the people deciding who belongs don't actually know." The words landed, soft, precise, and for the first time something shifted in the cabin that couldn't be ignored. The man in the suit looked up again, longer this time. The woman with the diamonds stopped whispering. Even Emily, standing at the edge of the galley, felt the change ripple outward. Lindsay's jaw tightened. "You're out of line," she said. Naomi didn't raise her voice. "I'm sitting in a seat," she replied. "That seat is not yours." Naomi's gaze didn't move. "Then whose is it?" Lindsay didn't answer immediately. Because the truth, the actual truth, was simple. The seat belonged to the name on the manifest. And that name was Naomi Carter. But Lindsay had already made her decision long before Naomi stepped onto the aircraft. And now she was committed to it. "It's not yours," Lindsay repeated. Naomi studied her for a moment. Then she leaned back slightly. Not in defeat, in stillness, like she had reached a conclusion. "Okay," Naomi said quietly. That wasn't the response Lindsay expected. Her eyes narrowed. "Okay?" she echoed. Naomi nodded once. "Okay." And just like that, she stopped engaging. No argument, no pushback, no reaction. She turned her gaze back toward the window, the sky stretching wide and endless beyond the glass. The conversation was over. Or at least, that's what it looked like. But something about it didn't feel finished. Not to Lindsay, because this didn't feel like a win. It felt like something slipping out of her control. And she didn't tolerate that, at all. Behind her, Emily shifted again, her heart beating faster now, because she could feel it building, the pressure, the tension, the sense that something had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And Lindsay wasn't done. Not even close. She took one step closer to Naomi, then another, Close enough now that the space between them felt tight. Close enough that the rest of the cabin seemed to fade just slightly at the edges. "Let me make something very clear," Lindsay said, her voice low, controlled, but carrying just enough for others to hear. Naomi didn't turn, didn't respond, but she was listening. "People like you," Lindsay continued, "don't just get to walk into places like this and decide you belong." There it was, not implied anymore, not hidden, said out loud, and the silence that followed was absolute. No shifting, no whispering, no one even pretending not to hear. Naomi's reflection stared back at her from the window, calm, unmoved, unshaken. Her fingers tightened just slightly against the armrest, just enough to feel it, then released. And when she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before, but somehow heavier. "You should be careful with that line," she said. Lindsay leaned in. "What line?" Naomi turned her head just enough to meet her eyes again. "The one you think you're allowed to cross." For a moment, just a moment, Lindsay hesitated. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. Then it vanished, replaced by something harder, something colder, something that didn't care anymore. "Watch me," Lindsay said, and with that, she reached for the overhead compartment above Naomi's seat. The latch clicked, the door began to open, and whatever fragile control had been holding the situation together started to break. The overhead compartment clicked open. The sound was small, but in that moment, it felt loud enough to echo. Naomi's bag shifted slightly as the door lifted. The soft leather creaked under its own weight, the strap sliding just an inch toward the edge. Naomi stood up. Not fast, not aggressive, just deliberate. "Don't," she said. Her voice wasn't raised, but it carried. Lindsay didn't stop. Her hand closed around the strap of the bag, fingers tightening as she pulled it forward, dragging it out of the compartment like it didn't belong there. "I said don't touch my belongings," Naomi repeated. This time her voice was firmer, not louder, just final. The cabin air felt thinner now. Everyone was watching. No one was pretending otherwise anymore. The man in the suit had fully turned in his seat. The woman with the diamonds held her breath without realizing it, her fingers frozen over her phone screen. Even Emily had stepped halfway out of the galley, her body angled forward, as if she might intervene, then stopping herself at the last second, because this had gone too far, but not far enough for anyone to act. Lindsay pulled the bag free. The zipper jangled softly as it shifted in her grip. A pen slipped from the outer pocket, bouncing once against the floor with a light plastic click. Naomi stepped closer. Now they were face to face in the narrow aisle. Too close. The kind of closeness that forced attention, forced confrontation. Naomi was slightly taller, her gaze steady, unblinking. "Put it back," she said. Lindsay's grip tightened. No. There was no hesitation in it. No doubt. Just refusal. The cabin held still again. Naomi didn't reach for the bag, didn't snatch, didn't escalate. She just stood there, her presence filling the space in a way that wasn't loud, but undeniable. "I'm asking you one more time," Naomi said. "Put my bag back." Lindsay stepped forward instead, closing the distance. Their faces were inches apart now, close enough to see every detail. The faint line of tension at the corner of Naomi's eyes, the sharp set of Lindsay's jaw. "Listen carefully," Lindsay said, her voice dropping low, tight, controlled in a way that made it more dangerous than shouting. I don't know how you got on this aircraft. I don't know whose name you're using. But people like you don't belong here. There it was again, clear, unfiltered. You don't sit up front, she continued. You don't give orders, and you don't tell me what to do. Naomi didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't raise her voice. She just held her ground. I'm not giving you orders, she said quietly. I'm telling you to respect a boundary. Lindsay's eyes hardened. Or what? The question hung there, sharp, challenging. Naomi looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time there was something different in her expression. Not anger, not fear, something colder, something that had already decided what came next. I'm asking you to stop, Naomi said. Lindsay didn't. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that still carried across the cabin. You don't get to ask. And then Naomi reached past her, just slightly, her hand lifting toward the bag. She didn't grab it, didn't pull, just moved to take what was hers. Lindsay reacted instantly. Her hand shot out, grabbing Naomi's wrist. Hard. The contact was sharp, sudden. Naomi's body stilled. The cabin froze. Every breath paused. Don't, Lindsay said, her voice tight, almost shaking now. Not from fear, but from something closer to anger pushed too far. Naomi slowly pulled her wrist free. Not with force, just enough, just controlled. And that was the moment something snapped. Because Lindsay wasn't expecting control. She was expecting resistance she could fight, emotion she could overpower. This calm, this refusal to react, it left her with nothing. And in that empty space, she filled it with force. Her hand moved. Fast this time, a sharp motion across the narrow aisle. The sound of it cracked through the cabin. Flat, clean, final. Naomi's head turned slightly with the impact. The sting spread across her cheek instantly, heat rising beneath the skin, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the engines seemed quieter for a second. Naomi stayed exactly where she was. Her hand rose slowly, touching her cheek. Not clutching, not reacting, just acknowledging. Her fingers rested there for a moment, then lowered. She straightened, looked back at Lindsay, and the look in her eyes was not what Lindsay expected. There were no tears, no shock, no anger, just certainty, deep, unshakable. You just made a very expensive mistake, Naomi said. The words were quiet, but they carried. Lindsay let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Is that supposed to scare me? Naomi didn't answer. She didn't need to. She simply stepped back, reclaiming the small space around her, and sat down. Calmly, deliberately, like the moment had already passed for her, like whatever came next was already in motion. Behind them, Emily's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide, her chest rising and falling too quickly. She looked toward the cockpit, toward the door, waiting for something. Anything. The door cracked open slightly. Captain Harris leaned out, his face tight with tension. What's going on out here? He asked. Lindsay turned immediately. Her composure snapped back into place like it had never left. This passenger became disruptive, she said smoothly. Refused a standard security check. Got physical. The lie came easily. Too easily. Captain Harris looked at Naomi. Her cheek was already reddening, the outline faint, forming. Ma'am, he said carefully. Are you all right? Naomi met his eyes. Your flight attendant just struck me, she said. Her voice was steady, measured, unshaken. The cabin held its breath again. Captain Harris hesitated, just for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. Let's keep things calm, he said. We'll handle it when we land. Handle it when we land. Not now, not here. He pulled the door closed. And just like that, the system chose silence. Again, Lindsay adjusted her sleeve, smoothed her uniform, and walked back toward the galley without another word. Her heels clicked, steady, certain, like she believed she had just won. Naomi sat alone in the forward seat, the faint mark on her cheek darkening by the second. She reached into her hoodie pocket, pulled out her phone. The screen lit up, the recording was still running. Every word, every moment. Captured. She opened her messages, found a name, typed 6 words, then pressed send. She placed the phone face down on the armrest, leaned her head back, closed her eyes. Outside, the sky stretched endless and blue. Inside, everything had changed, but no one else understood how much. Not yet. The jet moved forward like nothing had happened. 30,000 feet above the ground, the sky stretched clean and endless, a pale blue horizon that didn't carry memory, didn't carry consequence. The world outside had no idea what had just taken place inside that narrow aisle. Inside the cabin, the air felt different, thicker, quieter. Not the same quiet as before, this one had weight. Naomi sat still in the forward seat, her head resting lightly against the leather, her eyes closed. From a distance, she looked like she might be resting, like the tension had passed and left her behind. It hadn't. Her cheek pulsed faintly, the warmth deepening beneath the surface. The mark would come fully soon. She knew that without looking. But she didn't touch it again, didn't react, didn't give the moment anything it didn't deserve. Her hands rested loosely in her lap, fingers relaxed, breathing steady. If anyone expected anger, they didn't get it. If anyone expected fear, they didn't get that either, which made it worse, because now there was nothing for anyone else to respond to. Across the aisle, the man in the suit shifted again, finally sitting back, his shoulders tight, like he had just witnessed something he didn't want to remember. The woman with the diamonds pressed her lips together, her phone now face down on her lap. She wasn't scrolling anymore. No one was pretending now, but no one spoke either. Silence had chosen its side. In the galley, Lindsay moved with mechanical precision. She rinsed a glass that didn't need rinsing, wiped a surface that was already clean, adjusted a stack of napkins twice. Everything she did was controlled, measured, routine. But her hands were just slightly faster than before, her breathing just a little heavier. She didn't look toward the cabin, not directly, but she knew. She could feel it, the shift, the attention, the difference. Still, she held on to the only thing that mattered to her in that moment: control. Emily stood near the curtain, her fingers gripping the edge of the fabric, knuckles pale. She hadn't moved since the moment it happened, hadn't spoken, hadn't even fully breathed. Her eyes flicked between Naomi and Lindsay, caught in a loop she couldn't break, because she had seen it, every second of it, and she had done nothing. That realization settled in her chest like a weight, heavy, uncomfortable, permanent. Naomi's phone rested in her lap. The screen was dark, but beneath that, the recording was still running, the time counter moving forward, second by second. Every word, every pause, every choice, captured. She opened her eyes slowly. Not because she needed to, because she had decided to. The cabin came back into focus. Faces turned away, bodies angled just enough to signal distance, discomfort hidden behind silence. She reached for her phone, unlocked it. Her thumb moved across the screen, opening a message thread. Marcus Reed. No hesitation, no second thought. She typed 6 words. Pull the contract, effective immediately. She'd paused for half a second, then pressed send. The message disappeared into the quiet network of signals and satellites above them, moving faster than anything inside that cabin could react to. She placed the phone face down on the armrest. Didn't look at it again. It was done. Across the aisle, the man in the suit noticed the movement. Just barely. He didn't see what she typed. Didn't know what it meant. But something about the way she did it, calm, certain, final, made him uneasy. In the galley, Lindsay finally stopped moving. She stood still for a moment, her back to the cabin, staring at nothing in particular. Then she turned, not toward Naomi, toward Emily. "Get back to your position," she said. Her voice was steady again, controlled, like nothing had shaken it. Emily swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." She stepped back behind the curtain, but her eyes lingered just 1 second longer than they should have. Toward Naomi, toward the woman who hadn't raised her voice, hadn't fought back, hadn't even asked for help, and yet felt like the only person in control of the room. Back in her seat, Naomi picked up her coffee again. It had cooled further now. She took a sip anyway. The bitterness lingered on her tongue, sharp but familiar. She set the cup down gently. Outside the window, the clouds drifted past in slow, endless patterns, untouched by anything below. Inside the cabin, something invisible had already begun to move. Not loud, not visible, but real. The kind of movement that didn't announce itself until it was too late to stop. And the people inside that aircraft still didn't understand what they had stepped into. Not Lindsay, not the passengers, not even the captain behind that closed door. Because to them, this was over, a confrontation, an incident, something to be handled later, something to be explained away. But to Naomi, it had never been about the moment. It had always been about what came after, and what came after was already on its way. The descent began quietly. There was no announcement at first, just a subtle shift in the engine's tone, a change in pressure that only those who flew often could feel. The nose of the aircraft angled slightly downward, and the endless blue outside the window slowly gave way to something more defined. Clouds parted. Land appeared. Savannah stretched below, patches of green, winding roads, the glint of sunlight reflecting off distant rooftops. Inside the cabin, nothing looked different, but everything felt different. Naomi remained still in her seat, her hands folded loosely in her lap now, her laptop closed, her work done. The faint imprint on her cheek had deepened into a visible mark, subtle but unmistakable, catching the light when she turned even slightly. She hadn't spoken again, hadn't acknowledged anyone, hadn't needed to, because whatever she had set in motion didn't require another word. Across the aisle, the man in the suit finally put his phone away. He leaned back, staring ahead, his expression tighter now, like he was trying to process something that no longer made sense. The woman with the diamonds adjusted her posture, smoothing her dress, but her eyes kept drifting toward Naomi, drawn by something she couldn't quite name. Unease, recognition, maybe even doubt. In the galley, Lindsay checked her reflection again. Her uniform was still perfect, hair still pinned tight, every detail exactly where it should be. She adjusted her collar once more, aligning it with precision, as if restoring order externally could steady something internal, because something didn't feel right. Not completely. But she pushed it down, ignored it. This would be handled on the ground. It always was. Behind her, Emily stood quieter than before, her movements minimal, her attention sharper. She had stopped fidgeting, stopped pretending. Now she was just watching, learning, and waiting. The landing gear deployed with a muted mechanical hum beneath the floor. A slight vibration passed through the cabin. No one spoke. The runway came into view, closer, closer, then the soft double thump of wheels meeting ground. A brief bounce, then smooth, controlled. The engines reversed gently, slowing the aircraft as it rolled forward across the tarmac. Outside, the morning sun had fully claimed the sky. Bright, warm, unforgiving. The jet slowed to a stop. Silence settled again. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was anticipatory. Captain Harris stepped out of the cockpit, avoiding eye contact, his attention fixed on a tablet in his hands as if it required urgent focus. "Welcome to Savannah," he said, his voice professional, detached. "We'll be deplaning shortly." No mention of what happened. No acknowledgement. Just procedure. He moved past without looking at Naomi, or Lindsay, or anyone else, because it was easier that way. Lindsay stepped forward, taking her position near the cabin door. Her movements were smooth again, practiced, automatic. She reached for the handle, paused, then opened the door. Warm air rushed in immediately, thick, humid, carrying the scent of jet fuel and sun-warmed asphalt. She looked out and froze. At the base of the stairs, 2 black SUVs waited. Not airport vehicles, not rentals, identical, polished, engine idling quietly. The sunlight reflected off their surfaces in sharp lines, emphasizing their presence rather than softening it. On the front door of each vehicle, a silver emblem, clean, minimal, unfamiliar to Lindsay, but deliberate. The doors opened. 3 men stepped out, all in suits, not flashy, not loud, just precise. The kind of presence that didn't ask for attention. It assumed it. One of them adjusted his jacket, scanning the aircraft with a focused gaze. Then he looked up, directly at the open door, behind Lindsay, into the cabin. "Ms. Carter," he called. The name cut through the air, clear, confident, certain. Lindsay's fingers tightened slightly around the doorframe. Her posture shifted, just a fraction, enough to show it. Behind her, movement stirred in the cabin. Heads turned, eyes lifted. The man in the suit leaned forward. The woman with the diamonds went completely still. Emily stepped out from behind the galley curtain, her breath catching without her realizing it. Naomi stood, slowly, deliberately. She picked up her bag, sliding it over her shoulder with practiced ease. No rush, no hesitation. She stepped into the aisle, walked forward. Each step measured, each movement controlled. The mark on her cheek caught the sunlight as she passed beneath it. Visible now, unavoidable. She reached the door, stopped. Lindsay turned toward her, her expression uncertain for the first time since the flight began. She started, but the words didn't come together. Naomi didn't respond. She stepped past her, out into the light, down the stairs. The heat wrapped around her instantly, the sun sharp against her skin, the brightness cutting through everything that had happened inside that cabin. At the bottom, The man who had called her name stepped forward. "Ms. Carter," he said again, his tone respectful, controlled. Naomi met his eyes. He noticed the mark on her cheek immediately. Something shifted in his expression, tightened, just slightly. "Everything is in place," he said quietly. "Legal is ready." Naomi nodded once. "Good." Behind her, at the top of the stairs, Lindsay stood frozen, watching, trying to understand, trying to piece together something that no longer fit the version of reality she had built. "You're Naomi Carter?" she asked, her voice thinner now, uncertain. Naomi turned, slowly, looked up at her. The distance between them felt different now. Not just physical, something else, something deeper. "I'm the one you hit," Naomi said. Her voice carried upward, calm, clear. "And I'm the one who owns the contract you just lost." The words landed, not loud, but final. And in that moment, the air shifted, because the truth had arrived. And nothing inside that jet would ever be the same again. For a moment, no one moved. Not on the stairs, not on the tarmac, not inside the cabin where every pair of eyes had locked onto the scene unfolding below. The sunlight was different out here, brighter, harsher. It didn't soften anything. It revealed. Naomi stood at the base of the stairs, the heat pressing gently against her skin, the mark on her cheek now fully visible in the daylight. There was no hiding it, no explaining it away. Behind her, the two black SUVs idled quietly, engines humming low. The men in suits stood in position, not rushed, not tense, but ready. The kind of readiness that came from knowing exactly what needed to happen next. Marcus Reed stepped closer. He didn't speak immediately. His eyes stayed on Naomi's face, on the mark that hadn't been there a few hours ago. His jaw tightened, but his voice, when it came, was controlled. "Do you need medical attention?" he asked. Naomi shook her head. "No." A pause, then quieter. "I need documentation." Marcus nodded once. "Already arranged." Behind him, one of the lawyers, an older man with silver at his temples, opened a portfolio, pulling out a folder without a word. Papers neatly aligned, tabs marked, prepared. Everything had moved quickly, because the message Naomi sent had been understood immediately. Naomi turned slightly, her gaze lifting back up toward the aircraft. Lindsay was still standing at the top of the stairs, still frozen, still trying to process what she had just heard. The contract. Lost. The words echoed in her mind, but they didn't land yet. They couldn't. Because accepting them meant accepting something else, something bigger, something she had refused to see from the beginning. "You're the client?" Lindsay said, her voice thin now, stripped of the authority it had carried just minutes before. Naomi looked up at her. Not with satisfaction, not with anger, just clarity. "This aircraft exists because of my company," Naomi said. The words settled into the space between them. Heavy, final. The cabin behind Lindsay shifted again. The man in the suit stood up halfway, as if trying to get a better view. The woman with the diamonds pressed her hand lightly against her chest, her expression tightening with realization. Emily stepped forward without thinking, stopping just behind Lindsay, her eyes wide, not in shock anymore, but in understanding. Pieces falling into place. Everything they had witnessed, everything they had ignored, now reframed, now undeniable. Lindsay's hand gripped the railing beside her, her knuckles whitened. "That's not possible," she said, but the words lacked conviction. Naomi didn't respond. She didn't need to argue, because the evidence wasn't in words anymore. It was in the people standing behind her, in the way Marcus stood just half a step behind her shoulder. Not beside, not in front. In the way the lawyers waited, not speaking, not introducing themselves, because they didn't need to. In the way everything had already been set in motion before the plane even touched the ground. Naomi turned away. The conversation for her was over. She walked toward the SUV. Marcus opened the rear door without hesitation. She stepped inside. The interior was cool, quiet, insulated from the heat outside. As the door closed, the outside world softened again, but this time it wasn't distant. It was contained. Marcus slid into the seat beside her. The lawyers took their places behind them. For a second, no one spoke. Then Marcus did. "The board has been notified," he said. "They're already moving to finalize the termination." Naomi looked straight ahead. "Good," he hesitated. "Media will pick this up once legal files." Naomi nodded once. "Then we make sure they have everything they need." Marcus's gaze flicked briefly to her cheek again, then back. "Understood." Outside at the top of the stairs, Lindsay hadn't moved. Not really. Her body was still there, but something inside her had shifted. Cracked. Because now, the situation had context. And that context didn't favor her. Emily stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lindsay," she said. But she didn't finish. Because what was there to say? The ground beneath them had already changed. Captain Harris appeared behind them, his face tight, his earlier detachment gone. He looked from Lindsay to the tarmac, to the SUVs, to the men in suits, then back again. "What's going on?" he asked. No one answered immediately, because the answer was already visible. It was just a matter of whether he was willing to accept it. Lindsay swallowed, her throat dry. She said, Lindsay began, then stopped, because repeating it made it real, and real was something she couldn't control. Down on the tarmac, one of the lawyers stepped forward, holding a document. He didn't look up, didn't call out. He simply stood there, waiting. Because this part didn't require urgency. It required certainty. Inside the SUV, Naomi reached into her bag and pulled out a small, compact mirror. She opened it, looked at her reflection. The mark on her cheek was clear now, defined. She studied it for a moment. Not with emotion, not with regret, just acknowledgement. Then she closed the mirror, placed it back in her bag, and leaned her head slightly against the seat. Outside, the sun continued to rise higher, the light growing stronger, sharper, illuminating everything without hesitation. And inside that brightness, there was no hiding anymore. Not for Lindsay, not for the crew, not for the system that had chosen silence over action. Because now, the truth wasn't just known, it was visible. And it wasn't going away. The first call came before the SUV even left the tarmac. Inside the vehicle, the air was cool and controlled, a sharp contrast to the heat outside. Naomi sat still, her posture composed, her gaze forward. Marcus's phone buzzed once in his hand. He glanced at the screen, then at her. "It started," he said quietly. Naomi didn't ask what that meant. She already knew. Marcus answered the call, his voice low, precise. "Yes. Yes, she's with me. No, there's no delay. Execute as planned." He listened for a moment, then ended the call. "The board has voted," he said. "Contract terminated, effective immediately." Naomi nodded once. No reaction, no satisfaction, just acknowledgement. The SUV pulled away from the runway, tires rolling smoothly over the asphalt, leaving the jet behind, still, exposed, and suddenly very small against the wide open sky. Back on the aircraft, everything unraveled fast. Captain Harris stood in the aisle now, his earlier composure gone. His eyes moved from Lindsay to the passengers, to Emily, then back again. "What exactly happened up here?" he demanded. No one answered right away, because the truth, the full truth, was no longer something they could control. Lindsay's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. For the first time, she didn't have the words ready. She was disruptive, she said finally, but it sounded weaker now, like something rehearsed that didn't hold up under light. Emily looked at her. Really looked at her. And this time, she didn't look away. "That's not what happened," Emily said. The words were quiet, but they landed. Lindsay turned sharply. "Excuse me?" Emily's hands trembled slightly, but she didn't step back. "She asked for coffee," Emily said. "You ignored her. You—" She hesitated, her voice catching for a split second. "You said she didn't belong here." The cabin shifted. The man in the suit sat up straighter. The woman with the diamonds lowered her gaze. Captain Harris's expression tightened. Lindsay's voice sharpened. "You need to be very careful." "No," Emily said, interrupting her. That surprised even herself. But she didn't stop. "I saw everything," she continued, her voice steadier now, from the moment she got on the plane. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Lindsay stared at her, disbelief flashing across her face. "You're choosing her over your own crew?" she asked. Emily swallowed. "I'm choosing what's true." The words hung there, because they weren't just about that moment. They were about everything that had led up to it. Captain Harris ran a hand over his face, exhaling slowly. "Did you strike her?" he asked, turning to Lindsay. Lindsay didn't answer immediately, because now there were witnesses. There was doubt. There was something she couldn't smooth over with authority alone. "She became physical," Lindsay said finally. "I responded." "That's not what happened," Emily said again, this time louder, more certain. And that was it. The illusion cracked completely. Within hours, the story began to spread. At first, quietly, a call from the legal team to corporate. A report filed. Then another. Then someone asked for the passenger manifest. Then someone recognized the name. Naomi Carter. The room at headquarters went silent, because that name meant something. By the time the SUV reached the city, the first internal meeting had already been called. Executives gathered in a glass-walled conference room, phones buzzing, screens lighting up with incoming emails, legal notices, emergency alerts. "What do you mean the contract is gone?" one of them asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. "It's gone," another replied. "Pulled. No negotiation." "That's 200 million. I know what it is." Silence followed, because everyone understood what that number meant. Not just revenue, reputation, position, future. And it was gone. Because of what happened on that flight. Back at the terminal, Lindsay sat alone in a small office, her uniform still perfect, her posture still straight. But something inside her had collapsed. Security had already taken her badge, not roughly, not dramatically, just firmly. Procedure, the same way everything had always been handled. Only this time, she was on the other side of it. Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it immediately. "Unknown number," she answered. "Hello?" Silence, then a voice, calm, controlled. "Ms. Brooks," the man said, "this is legal counsel for Pinnacle Holdings." Lindsay's grip tightened. "I think there's been the misunderstanding." "There hasn't," the voice replied. Flat, certain. "We have a full recording of the incident." The words hit harder than anything else. Recording. Lindsay's breath caught. "What recording?" she asked. "The one captured during the flight," the man said, "from boarding to the moment of contact." Silence filled the line, because now there was no version of events she could reshape, no angle she could control. Everything, every word, had been preserved exactly as it happened. "We will be proceeding accordingly," the voice continued. "You'll be contacted with next steps." The line went dead. Lindsay stared at the phone in her hand. For the first time since the morning began, she didn't know what to do. Across the city, Naomi stepped out of the SUV in front of a glass office building. The sunlight reflected off the surface, turning it into a mirror of sky and steel. Marcus moved ahead of her, holding the door open. Inside, people were already waiting. Lawyers, executives, decisions. But Naomi paused for a moment before stepping in. She turned her head slightly, looking out across the street where life continued as usual. Cars passed. People walked. The world hadn't stopped. It never did. But something had shifted, not just for her, for everyone connected to that moment. She stepped inside, and behind her, the consequences continued to unfold, not loudly, not all at once, but steadily, relentlessly, because this was never just about one person. It was about a system that had allowed it to happen, ignored it, protected it, until it couldn't anymore. And now, it was falling. Not all at once, not in a single moment anyone could point to and say, that was it. It came in waves. First, the contract. $200 million. Gone with a signature that didn't hesitate. Then the calls, clients asking questions, partners asking for explanations, investors asking for reassurance that no one could honestly give. By the end of the day, the company's leadership sat in a room that felt smaller than it should have, even with walls made of glass. No one spoke at first, because everyone already knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't something that could be quietly handled, filed away, forgotten. This was visible, and it wasn't going away. The recording surfaced the next morning. 47 seconds. That was all it took. 47 seconds of clear, undeniable truth. Lindsay's voice, sharp, controlled, certain. Naomi's voice, calm, steady, unshaken. And then the sound. Not graphic, not exaggerated. Just real, followed by silence. The kind that says everything words can't. By noon, it had spread. News outlets picked it up. Social media carried it further. The story wasn't just about what happened on a jet anymore. It was about what it meant, about what people had seen, about what people had ignored. Inside corporate offices, screens played the clip on repeat. Inside homes, people watched and paused and replayed it again. Because something about it felt familiar, uncomfortable, too real. Back at headquarters, the internal reports came in. 3 prior complaints against Lindsay Brooks. All from passengers. All dismissed. All closed without action. Patterns no one wanted to see. Now impossible to ignore. Captain Harris submitted his statement that afternoon. Short, careful. I chose to de-escalate and address the matter upon landing. It read like procedure, but it didn't read like responsibility. Emily's statement came next. Longer, clearer. She described everything. From the moment Naomi stepped onto the aircraft to the silence that followed. She didn't rush, didn't exaggerate. She just told the truth. And that truth carried weight, because it didn't stand alone. By the end of the week, decisions had been made, not announced loudly, but final. Lindsay Brooks was removed, her badge revoked, her name no longer associated with the company she had spent decades inside. Captain Harris retired quietly. No press, no ceremony, just absence. The company released a statement, carefully written, measured, acknowledging failure, promising change. But the words didn't carry the same weight as the moment that forced them, because people could hear the difference now. Across the city, in a conference hall filled with quiet anticipation, Naomi Carter stood at the edge of a stage. The room was full, industry leaders, executives, people who understood numbers, power, reputation. But today, they were listening for something else. Naomi stepped forward. No hoodie this time, no worn sneakers, a simple black dress, clean lines. Nothing excessive, nothing to prove. The room settled as she reached the podium. She didn't bring notes, didn't need them. She looked out at the crowd, her expression calm, her presence steady in a way that filled the space without demanding it. For a moment she said nothing. Then, "My mother worked nights," she began. Her voice was clear, unhurried. She was a nurse. Came home every morning when the sun was just coming up. She smelled like hospital soap and exhaustion. A quiet ripple moved through the room. Not discomfort, recognition. She didn't have much, Naomi continued, but she taught me something I never forgot. She paused. Not for effect, for meaning. You don't treat people well because they might be important. Silence, deep, focused. You treat people well because of who you are. The words settled, simple but heavy. Naomi's gaze moved slowly across the room. Not judging, not accusing, just seeing. I didn't end that contract because I was angry, she said. I ended it because if that's how your system treats someone when you think they're nobody, then I know exactly what your system is built on. No one spoke, no one shifted, because there was nothing to interrupt, nothing to challenge, only something to sit with. Naomi stepped back from the podium. No dramatic exit, no final gesture, just a quiet conclusion. Later that day, in a smaller office across town, Naomi sat across from a young business owner named Daniel Price. His company was small, 12 employees, a space barely large enough for all of them to work comfortably. But his hands were steady when he spoke, his ideas clear, his numbers solid. He didn't expect what came next. "We're awarding you the contract," Naomi said. Daniel blinked. "You're what?" Naomi smiled slightly. "You're qualified," she said. "You're ready, and you deserve the chance." The room went quiet, because sometimes opportunity doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives when someone decides to see you clearly. Months passed. The story faded from headlines, but not from memory. Emily stood at the front of a training room, speaking to a group of new hires. Her voice was steadier now, more certain. "Pay attention," she said. "Not just to what people say, but to what's happening around you." She paused. Silence isn't neutral. The room listened. Because she knew. Because she had been there. And she had chosen differently. Back in the air, on another flight, Naomi sat by the window. The sky looked the same. Endless. Bright. But the cabin felt different. No tension. No quiet judgment. just space. She rested her hand lightly on the armrest, her posture relaxed, her gaze steady as the clouds drifted past. No one questioned her seat. No one needed to, because the seat had always been hers, not because of money, not because of power, but because of something deeper, something no one could take away. Dignity. And this time, everyone understood it. When Naomi Carter sat back down on a different flight, in a seat no one dared question, it wasn't the leather or the view that changed. It was the silence around her, finally filled with respect instead of doubt. This story isn't about power showing up loud. It's about how dangerous it is when we decide someone's worth before they ever speak. Because the cost of that judgment doesn't always show up right away. But when it doesn't miss. So the next time you see someone who doesn't look the part, pause for a second. Treat them with the same respect you'd give Naomi Carter, because you never know whose story you're stepping into. If this story hit you, comment 1 below. And be honest. Have you ever stayed silent in a moment like that? Or would you have spoken up? There's another story coming next. And this one might make you question a moment from your own past.